What's going on, everybody? It's Mike. I wanted to do a special edition of this because there's a lot of questions about whether President Biden should get off the ticket, whether he's going to get off the ticket, and what's going to happen. Now, first, President Biden and whether he should get off the ticket. At the end of the day, that's a decision that's up to him. But there are consequences to his decision. A lot of Democrats and a lot of Americans feel like there wasn't full transparency in his health and how he was doing. I know on my end, there's a lot of frustration because people in the administration have consistently said he's healthy. There's nothing to worry about. It's just, it's his stride. It's, he is just stumbling a bit. It's a little bit of a speech impediment. But the more we saw, the less confident we were. I think a lot of people are now pointing out that the big warning sign should have been the fact that he didn't do a Super Bowl interview. So I say all that to say, we as Democrats have a decision to make. If President Biden stays on the ticket, then we've got to vote because Donald Trump is an existential threat. And yes, it is okay to still say that Donald Trump is an existential threat. The assassination attempt, I don't condone. Political violence has no place. But it is still okay to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat, an existential threat, someone who wants to fundamentally change the type of government we are, who wants to fundamentally change the Constitution. And so if you're Joe Biden, here's what you have to consider. On one hand, you are the only person who defeated Donald Trump. Your legacy, the 15 million jobs, the cap on insulin, the infrastructure bill, getting us out of COVID, all things that are tied to your legacy. But people will remember you for whether you defeated Trump a second time or ushered in an even scarier proposition, which is a Trump administration who is supported by a Supreme Court that's bought and paid for, and with a House and Senate that are basically prepared to do anything that he wants. We're talking about rolling back abortion rates even more, total bans on abortion with no exceptions, rolling back the Civil Rights Act, making it so that you can potentially discriminate against someone because of their color. These protections that were afforded took generations to fight for. Our ancestors fought for these rights. And now a court that is bought and paid for, Clarence Thomas, Justice Alito, justices who are accepting millions of dollars in gifts while ruling on cases that are before them. There's clearly a bias. I mean, you've got Justice Thomas's wife, who was a perpetrator on January 6th, going as far as emailing with the president, and he's ruling on cases that have to do with January 6th and whether it was an insurrection. So there's a reason that people don't have faith in institution, faith in our court. And that's what Joe Biden really, he's got to consider. If he loses, if the polls are correct, then it's not just his loss. It's a loss of the White House. It's a loss of the House. It's a loss of the Senate. It is a complete and total handing over of power to Republicans. So all those things that he's done, all the good that he's done, isn't just going to be wiped away, but it's going to be replaced by someone hell-bent on revenge. Now, if you believe that if Joe Biden steps aside, that the Democrats can win, that it's just an age issue and not a policy issue, which is what I believe, then the right decision would be to nominate Kamala Harris. Let me say, there is one person that could be the nominee if Joe Biden were to step aside, and that's Kamala Harris. The notion that Democrats will pass over anyone for the first Black woman who has served 3.5 years as vice president, done a fantastic job. And look, I don't care whether people like Kamala Harris. That's not what this job should be about. I get that there's, the likability factor, but she has done this job. She has been there. She's been in the room. You're talking about someone who was Attorney General of California, one of the biggest, most profitable states and economies in the world. She's a U.S. Senator. She now served as vice president. She should have the support of the Democratic Party should Joe Biden step aside. And I firmly believe that if Joe Biden steps aside, that not only should she be the nominee, but she is someone who I think the country could rally around in this moment. Because at the end of the day, people really like Joe Biden. People, I think, believe that the policies he put in place have made us a stronger country, a better country, but there's still work to be done. And so that legacy can be finished out by Kamala Harris. All this talk about brokered conventions, open conventions, there is not time for that, one. And you want to talk about fracturing the party? Skip over the first black woman. Black women have been the foundation of the Democratic Party, the most consistent voters. There would be no President Biden without the African American community and specifically without black women. So lose me with that skipping over Kamala Harris stuff. Joe Biden is a great man. I think he has served this country well. But it is legitimate to have a conversation about whether he is the best person to lead our country forward. That's not because we don't agree with him. It's not because we don't like him. It's not because we don't believe that his agenda is the right agenda. It's about winning. That is all that matters right now. And so as Joe Biden sits at home reflecting, hopefully healing up from COVID, there are questions that he needs to ask himself, and they've got to be tough questions. He has spent his entire life trying to get to this moment. He spent his entire life trying to become president. Now, at the last minute, people are asking him to step aside, to give up that chance to beat Trump again. You don't become president without believing in yourself, without having supreme confidence. There's no doubt that Joe Biden believes that he could beat Donald Trump. But does the rest of the party, does the rest of America believe that he can win? If you look at the polling, it doesn't. And the polling isn't, we don't like your policies, Joe. We don't like you. It's that a campaign is a tough thing to do. It is tough to crisscross this country. It is tough to make the argument every day for why you are best positioned to be the leader of our country. 4 years does damage on you. Look at President Obama after the first 4 years. After that next 4 years, he's a different man. You know, my grandmother, she's 84. Her at 84 is different than other people at 84. So it's not that people wouldn't vote for Joe Biden. If he's at the top of the ticket, I firmly believe Democrats will still come out and vote. But it's not always about the people who we know are going to come out to vote. Sometimes it's about those independents or those non-typical voters who we've got to give a reason, got to give a little enthusiasm to get out and vote. And so as Joe Biden sits and reflects on whether or not he's going to leave the race, he can think about his legacy. Should he choose to step aside and endorse Vice President Harris, he could be a kingmaker for the party. He has brought the country back from the brink of despair from COVID. He brought the country back from Donald Trump in January 6th. And now he has the chance to finish his legacy out by once and for all vanquishing this MAGA extremism, this strain of nationalism that has taken over the country. This is his chance. You got to know when to pass the torch. And my fear is that if he loses, all of the legacy moments, all of the policies that he's passed won't just be wiped away, but he will be forever remembered for ushering in another period of Trumpism. And that won't just affect Joe Biden. That won't affect just the Biden family or the consultants or the campaign staff. It'll affect the everyday person. It'll affect the person in Tallahassee, Florida, person in Richmond, Virginia, person in Dearborn, Michigan. This is a rallying moment. This is bigger than just Joe Biden. This is bigger than Kamala Harris. This is about whether or not we want to save the democracy. This is about whether we want to have total bans on abortion, whether we want to have birth control be outlawed, whether IVF, something that many of us look to, whether that's gone. No one's saying you got to love who you vote for. How much do you love the country? How much do you love the opportunities that we have in our freedom? I don't mean Republican freedom, the kind where they can tell you what to do with your body. They can discriminate against you. I mean, this is a party that's talking about rounding up millions of undocumented immigrants, putting them in camps, and trying to deport them. This isn't a serious group, but it requires a serious moment. And so if Joe Biden stays on the ticket, Democrats, it's on us to make sure that we show up to win up and down the ticket. If he steps aside from the ticket, then it's our job to lift up whoever the nominee is. And I will say now, that nominee, should he step aside, needs to be Kamala Harris. It is our job to lift them up. We can't wait for anyone else to save us. It is on us. So with that, let's see what happens. But either way, we're going to get out and vote.